Welcome to Season 2 of What Kind of Man Are You?
We're living in a moment where the ground is shifting under our feet. Politics, identity, even basic humanity. It all feels up for grabs. As men, we're asking, what's our role in all this?
Time to tear up the old playbook. Do we step back, or do we finally reckon with what it means to be a man who actually gives a damn?
This is What Kind of Man Are You? The podcast where we untangle masculinity, privilege, and the messy work of showing up. I'm Degan Davis, a therapist, writer, and author of the poetry collection, What Kind of Man Are You?
And I'm writer and producer Chris Garbutt. Each episode, we'll tackle the big questions. How do we be better allies? How do we confront fear in the world and in ourselves? And what's our responsibility when the stakes are this high?
No easy answers, just real talk about shame, courage, and the small acts that aren't so small, like standing up when it counts.
So whether you're here to rethink masculinity, fight for justice, or just feel a little less alone in the chaos, let's get into it.
Welcome, everybody, to What Kind of Man Are You? And we are going to be talking today about a Bob Dylan film with Timothee Chalamet, A Complete Unknown. Yeah, I'm just having an image. I'm just thinking about, I don't know if I rarely see the Oscars, but I ordered a television just for the Oscars for like a couple of days. And I could see him, Timothee Chalamet, with his girlfriend, one of the Kardashians or something. And
Seriously?
yeah.
Oh, okay.
And I felt the youth in him. He's still a young guy, isn't he? And we talked about The Brutalist, right, before, and Adrian Brody won for that, but they were, I think, the main contenders. And anyway, I want to ask you about the film. We're going to talk about the film. Mainly, that's what we're going to do. Of course, we talk about man and masculinity for this episode. Yeah,
we're going to talk about the man, the myth, the legend.
That's right.
Bob Dylan, as portrayed in A Complete Unknown.
Give me. Do you want to give us a little shape of the story of where?
Yeah. So the story is basically the period where he first arrives in New York City to the time where he goes from being basically goes electric, right?
Yeah.
And like he was
Gymnast.
the top folk singer in America for a while, and then he decided to pick up an electric guitar and the folkies went crazy. So that's
They are.
classic time of his life that if you know anything about Bob Dylan, you know about that period, because he was a folk singer who became a rock singer. But the truth is, he's a musician. Would you call him a polyglot musician?
Yeah, in that way, I think he's always maybe reinventing. Like, he certainly invented himself, right?
Yeah,
like when he decided to become Bob Dylan, not Robert Zimmerman. He had done his homework. He had listened. He had learned his literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of folk songs, and he'd gone back through the catalog. But I think I read Chronicles, his beautiful book from, 20 years ago. In it, you can say reinvention, or he's always just wanting to push himself. And I think in that book, he talks about how and I can't remember the musical piece of it, but he talks about re-envisioning chord structures, and then he relearned a lot of his songs with this other chord structure pattern, and I know he said he plays often live with that to give I'm not sure what the exact reason for it was, but it certainly does give the songs a different emphasis. So what did you think of it?
I'll also just say there's a lot of background noise. I don't know if that's coming through, but we're sitting on the patio at Burdock.
Exactly, it's Chris's first patio
of the year.
Yeah,
it's not my first patio ever. Yeah, so we're came here to talk about this movie, and so I would say I have a lot to say about it. And my first reaction was I thought it was a really great movie, and I think that was a reaction to like how good the acting was. Like Timothee Chalamet is just incredible. He does a very good Dylan. My understanding is he sang those songs himself.
Absolutely.
He
and learned all the guitar work.
Learned all the guitar, so that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And so Monica Marie Barbaro played Joan Baez. All of those characters were really good. Ed Norton plays Pete Seeger, which
Brilliantly.
is just incredible.
He almost steals it in a strange way. He's so understated. Talking for a minute about Mask, let's come back to that, because he is like the quiet, gentle, masculine soul energy. And Bob, and you also have Johnny Cash coming in as they're really the other male figures, but Pete Seeger really is that steady, but more, less taken with ego in that way.
Yeah, and a very gentle soul in the movie.
Yeah.
And like, it took me a while. I was like, is that Ed Norton? I couldn't be sure, because I generally think of Ed Norton as having a more raw character in his roles. I really enjoyed all of that. And of course, I would say 90% of the songs I knew pretty well. And I was enjoying that. And he went to visit Woody Guthrie, and that was pretty moving. And Woody Guthrie was towards the end of his, was it Parkinson's he had, or it was
Or lung
very
cancer.
serious.
Yeah. He couldn't move properly. He couldn't talk very well.
And so he visited him in the hospital with and without Pete Seeger there.
Yeah.
And so all of that I found really quite moving. But as time went on, and the truth is, in the movie, he grows into himself. He becomes a star during this period. And then he turns on the folk world and goes electric. And a lot of the people, where was it? What was the festival? It was a folk festival.
I think it was the Newport Folk Festival.
The Newport Folk Festival. And so the organizers of the festival are infuriated that he's done this, and he did it without permission. And this is where I start to get a little, on the one hand, it's like he had to go in the direction, he had to follow his bliss. I'm cool with that. But there's one thing that's quite obvious that I think everyone would agree with, is that he was really terrible towards women. And I can see why women were attracted to him, and he seemed like he was very soulful in the way he talked and the things that mattered to him. But at the same time, he kind of played the two women in his life. Like, he didn't really break up with one before going with another, and he didn't really want to. And that's one part of it. But the other, which is more of a criticism of the character, so in a way that's fine. You don't necessarily like what the character did, but it was well depicted.
Yeah.
But the thing that I found about this movie is it felt a bit like it was full of tropes of the kind of artist mentality. The artist has to follow his muse wherever it takes him, and very male that way, and this kind of almost this great man theory. There's this idea he was a great man, so it was what he had to do, and he didn't have to piss everyone off by going electric on stage at a folk festival, but he did. I just feel like there's this sense that the artist's genius has to come above everything else, in spite of who gets. And I just find that's a trope in movies. And in the end, I've come to feel like very well executed movie, but the story was just like yet another story of a great artist who goes his own path.
It's true when you say earlier that this is a section of his life that people know a lot, and it has drama to it. Right? If you're going to choose to write the story, okay, we'll begin with him being a complete unknown. He gets picked up, Pete Seeger helps him out, he starts playing on open stages, he finds his voice and everything else, and then he sloughs off, lets go of some of that.
Drops the people who brought him to where he...
I will say I admire, I know what you mean about that trope piece for sure. It would be nice to be able to just to follow your art without necessarily hurting people around you. Do you know what I mean? And that seems to be something if you think about, we're talking about this now in 2025. The Me Too movement really brought a lot of awareness to just like the kind of like it's harder now for that trope to be part of something on its own.
Yeah.
It's like that it worked there because it was a biopic of Dylan. And so
Yeah.
we can follow it, and it was based on the book and everything. And so I think in terms of a narrative today, now you have, my daughter's been into that Daisy Jones and the Six.
Oh, yeah, I haven't
and
seen that yet.
Fleetwood Mac type band and everything. I haven't seen it all, but we've been learning some of the songs, which are pretty good. And I don't think you would necessarily get away with that if the great man, the genius theory, person doing whatever they want. And at least people are getting called on it now, right? Particularly those really, who am I thinking of?
P. Diddy?
Yeah. And also R.J. Kelly.
R. Kelly, yeah.
R. Kelly.
So many,
Kelly.
so many,
R. Kelly,
unfortunately.
yeah. So many, yeah. And then now you're hearing like, oh, who is at these parties like Jay-Z and anyway, which whatever, there's lots going on there.
But that's the thing though, is that I don't want to criticize the movie for saying this man was flawed, but there is,
Yeah.
when you think about the golden age of television and all these shows that are about flawed men, right? And
Yeah.
bad men, Sopranos, Breaking Bad, all this kind of thing. And obviously Bob Dylan isn't like any of those characters, but at the same time, what was new about that? What was fresh about that?
About the film, you mean,
about
the
the
way
movie,
the film,
yeah.
and what it brought to us. In that way, I don't think it was like, it wasn't an art film. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't
Yeah.
a film that was trying to get under, it was a film that was trying to tell a particular story. And I
Yeah.
think it was just done really well. Like Timothee Chalamet singing, not just the singing, the gestures that he took, the kind of blank look, the kind of, the inflection of his voice,
The focus,
the eyes, the
point
kind of hooded
ignoring
eyes.
anything else.
Yeah, he was a connoisseur. He really did a remarkable job, and the singing was amazing. My mom the other day went and bought the CD of him singing the Dylan songs.
Oh, the Timothee
yeah,
Chalamet
yeah.
singing. Oh, wow.
She's probably the last person on earth to be buying CDs. It's sweet. She has a CD player. But yeah, and just talking about Joan Baez for one moment, in the depiction, I think if you think about what this is a movie, I think it really, like, she was the strongest female character in the film. I don't even know, I think they chose to write her that way, and I think she probably was. I don't know her biography that way, but if you think about the balance of the film, I think you have Johnny Cash and Dylan on one hand, or like the men, almost like this wall of men, right? You know what? They
Right.
come in a limo to that scene when they're playing at the Newport Folk Festival in their black cars. They come in, everyone scatters. It's a bunch of men with them, maybe a bodyguard or two. They come in, they do their thing. There's women hanging on the outside. It almost looks like I don't know, like a Sopranos, but it's the
cliche.
60s, right? Yeah. But you have her holding her ground, singing, holding her ground, with the scene when she's storming and she turns to him and gives him the finger mid-strum.
Yeah.
And I think that just, I don't know.
But you know what that made me feel? Let's see a movie about Joan Baez. She seems actually more interesting than Bob Dylan.
I think Bob Dylan is one of the great songwriters ever. And I am way more, I don't know, I am more interested in him as a singer. And I still think he's interesting to write, to film.
I guess that's, to me, if you're going to tell the story of Dylan, why would you tell the story that everybody knows the best?
Because
That's what people want to see.
Yeah. It's interesting, right? It's very much along the lines of the kind of films that have come out around musicians recently. The Elton John film a couple of years ago, the Freddie Mercury film. They're like from beginning to stardom.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a certain trope in that is, hey, I want the Elvis was a little bit different. That was just really the beginning, right? But people are interested in that. I don't know if you saw this, I'm Not There, that Dylan film.
I actually haven't seen that one, and I was really interested in it.
That's been talked about and written up for a long time, but that's a much more interesting film at heart.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that's multiple people
yeah,
playing.
multiple Dylans.
Yeah.
And
Including Kate Blanchett.
yeah, who is like one of my favorite Dylans of those Dylans. But just to say, that's really looking at the ideas. Walt Whitman says we contain multitudes. Either here's the multitudes of Dylan in that way. And that's a movie that was not interested in just simply telling one story at all. It was like breaking him down, atomizing him and saying, okay, there are different parts and let's hear them. Let's hear about them.
Maybe that's what I was feeling about this movie. Again, everything you say I agree with in terms of the nuances of the character and how Timothee Chalamet played him. And even the story is really interesting. And there's a sort of betrayal of a mentor there, which is
Pete Seeger.
movie. Yeah, where Pete Seeger is really brought Bob Dylan into the public eye and gave him all the opportunities. And there's a sense that Bob Dylan left him behind, even whether that's true or not. And so all of that was moving. But I guess for me, it's like, I didn't feel like it contained multitudes in that movie.
No, that wasn't the idea.
No,
That
I guess
wasn't
it
the
wasn't.
idea. Yeah.
But I'm interested in what you were getting at before about these different male singers and the masculinity. And do you think they were archetypes or of these different types of men, or where were you going with that?
Yeah, I guess to me, the ones that stand out the most are Johnny Cash and Dylan. And Johnny Cash was played well in it. And I think you named it with that kind of like male genius and the like, let's just step out of the way because it's a hurricane force. And because that we're going to step out of its way and we're going to be bowled over by it. I don't know. They just seem very much sort of men of the time. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just thinking in contrast. You think about the Beatles, and I think, have you seen Get Back, the Disney?
Oh, all the footage from recording?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have all of it.
Yeah, it's remarkable, isn't it? It's just interesting to look. That's the same time period. Literally, he's coming in.
Yeah, Get Back is probably 5 years later.
From the electrification of Dylan,
Yeah,
you mean?
yeah.
Okay. So Dylan's an absolute household name and was torn the world up. And yeah, this movie, if you think about it, it didn't really do much with that. It didn't really. I think this movie was a biopic, as we said. It wasn't actually saying, let's look at all the complexities. If anything, it contrasted Pete Seeger and Joan Baez on one side as being a little more humane, less dickwaddy, and Dylan on the other side of just being like, I'm doing my thing here. I can't see too much depth except to say it was really well done film.
Yeah.
I did particularly, in terms of scenes, I loved when the Cuban Missile Crisis is on and they're literally all the New Yorkers, some are fleeing. Like that, I really felt the kind of anxiety in the air.
It did give a really good sense of what the time must have been like.
Yeah.
That time, we neither of us were even born then, but
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I did feel like I was there.
Yeah.
And kudos to that. There was he was aware of what was happening in the world. And,
Oh, yeah.
And in fact, he got that from Woody Guthrie, I think, and the whole
Totally.
point of music was to change the world, I think, for him.
Yeah, certainly at that point, he is responding. He's deeply inspired by Woody Guthrie, of course.
Yeah.
Then you have the power of him playing The Times They Are Changing, which I think they captured really well too. Then you have the power of the scene we're talking about in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, of him playing Masters of War. And I love that scene because you got Joan Baez packing up her things and feeling like you feel the fear through her, and she heads out. I'm sure if this was happening, if that happened as it is, it's curious. And then she goes into that dark bar and hears him playing that song, and we're hearing those lyrics through her eyes. That's one of those wild songs. Like, it's hard to write a political song. It's hard.
Because you can't be didactic. You can't be like trying to teach a lesson.
No, but I think his rage, actually, this is one of the times where I think rage actually gives it form.
Yeah,
and the
actually,
simplicity of the
and
chords.
the thing was, like, usually you can't get away with, I have a message and I'm gonna.
Oh.
But that's what that song actually does.
Yeah, I think he
really
calls
well.
people out so directly.
Yeah.
It's like maybe it's a question of
It's like he literally calls them on the carpet.
exactly.
Okay, come on. Next.
Yes. Yeah.
Stop criticizing what you don't understand.
Yeah. Yes. It's funny, I always think about another wonderful protest singer who I love, There you go, like Bob Dylan would like cringe hearing that. At that time, he would have been called a protest singer, but he was always doing what he wanted to do, which was grow. If you're not busy being born, you're busy dying. That's a line.
That's a quote from
That's
him.
a quote, yeah, from Dylan. And so he was just like doing that. It makes me think of Billy Bragg a little bit, who's ultimately, I love his political songs, but I love his love songs more. It's really hard to rate a political song. But then you have Dylan did such a remarkable job. Hurricane. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Let's talk. Can we talk a little
political song?
Oh,
too.
it's totally a totally political song, and so narrative. It's absolutely a story. There's a bar down the street, Hurricanes. Partially based on the hurricane. And can I ask you, we talked about the film, and I think we agree it's a kind of a biopic in this. Can I ask you about Dylan for a little bit? Like, any songs that really mean something to you? Do you have a favorite? Do you have any favorite lines of any Dylan song? What is he to you?
So first of all, I don't get Dylan the way a lot of my friends do. So I like Dylan's music. When he got a Nobel Prize, I was like, so my favorite song of his is Subterranean Homesick Blues, because I love the musicality, the fact that he's almost rapping at a time when that barely existed. Yeah. And of course the video with him holding all the cards and dropping
the relentlessness of the lyric of
the relentlessness of the lyrics. And it actually is a bit of a, I wouldn't say it's a protest song, but it's a social commentary.
Yeah.
And that, and it's got a lot of energy, and so that would be my favorite.
Nice.
What's your favorite?
I think my favorite is one a friend of mine played in Japan many years ago. It's Blind Willie McTell. Blind Willie
That's
McTell.
what the song's
That's what
called?
the song's called.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah. It's absolutely beautiful. I actually think he absolutely deserved it. It was the Pulitzer he got, right? Was it Nobel Prize for Literature? Yeah. I back it. I back him. I think he's the only songwriter to ever be awarded that, and I love it. I love it that a song, that a minstrel, that a songwriter can be seen in the same light as Thomas Transtromer and all these great poets and writers. But that song, it's beautiful, it's simple, and he's done a few versions with Mark Knopfler. Actually, I don't know. I just lyrically love it. It paints this incredible picture. If I can remember a couple of lines. See the arrows on the dart. I'm looking out the window of the St. James Hotel.
There is a way, it's not just in terms of the poetry of it, there is a use of language that you don't get from anyone else.
And with Dylan, you mean?
With Dylan, yeah. And even All Along the Watchtower, which is probably my favorite cover of a Dylan song, because I love Jimi Hendrix's version of it.
Yeah.
But there's something about, I don't even know exactly what's going on or what he's trying to say, but there's a visual component to it. Even saying there must be some kind of way out of here, like every single word feels perfectly placed there. And that's the first line.
Yeah.
And you know exactly what kind of feeling you're getting into just from that first line.
This is the moment this song opened up for me. And it was the last words of Blind Willie McTell. I'm gazing out the window of that St. James Hotel, and I know no one can sing the blues like Blind Willie McTell. But he goes through the entire history. I've seen the arrow on the doorpost saying this land is condemned, all the way from New Orleans to Jerusalem. I traveled through East Texas where many martyrs fell, and no one can sing the blues like Blind Willie McTell. I don't know, the honoring of him, it's just beautiful. And what were you just saying? You were talking about, lyrics. Then think about something like a song like Hard Rain's Gonna Fall. That's a wild song. I want to pull it up for a sec, because those lyrics are, if you think about the beat poets, 50s onward, that has a kind of beat sensibility to it. None is the number. It's strange, almost like hallucinogenic poetry.
It's also a fantastic name for a song.
When I talked earlier about the idea of calling him a protest singer, you can absolutely say, okay, this is a protest song, right? Like that there's in the way that the society I'm surrounded by there's a lot of problems here, right?
Yeah.
But he's looking at it. It's so epic. I stumbled on the side of 12 misty mountains. I've walked and have crawled on 6 crooked highways. I've stepped in the middle of 7 sad forests. I've been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. We've got all this environmental stuff. We have possibility of nuclear annihilation that we were just talking about. And it's a hard rain going to fall. We've got acid rain. It wasn't wiped out until after the Reagan years. So we probably
the Reagan years were where it came came to a head.
But this would have
yeah.
been this, but it was still happening earlier,
Yeah,
and then it
yeah.
came to a head there. But just want to say, there's the line where the executioner's face is always well hidden, where hunger is ugly, where souls are forgotten, where black is the color and where none is the number. And I'll tell it and think it and speak it and breathe it and reflect it from the mountains so all souls can see it. Then I'll stand on the ocean until I start sinking, but I'll know my song well before I start singing. And it's a hard rain's gonna fall. It's protest, but it feels like the rhythm of it could just be spoken and it would stand as poetry. And it's a song that transcends just its age, just that
Sure,
period.
yeah.
Black is the color, none is the number. Yeah, so he's good. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think he knows his shit. One thing I will say is because this movie came out at a very particular time in our history, and
Right.
Bob Dylan may not have loved being called a protest singer, but he came out of the protest movement for sure.
Yeah.
And I do remember thinking, because we watched this a couple months ago, and this was,
Just before Trump had actually been inaugurated.
yeah, I
right?
don't know if it was
We saw-
before or just after, but there was a thought came across my mind is who's going to be our Dylan today?
Yeah.
But
That's
broader,
a good question.
who, and I guess this kind of brings up, and I think we have a lot to talk about in this season actually, around what men are going to stand up, right?
Yeah.
Not stand up like some bro who wants to be a king of the world or something, but
Yeah.
stand up for those who are being trodden upon. And I go back to Woody
Yeah.
Guthrie, and his songs were about the working people, and
Yeah.
and this land is our land, right? You belong, and I think that kind of influence on Bob Dylan, and so we're starting to see it actually. I think we're starting to see some. They aren't famous yet, but every now and then I'll come across someone on social media or something, or who does a really good song about what's going on in the world right now. And I see a lot of people saying art is resistance. It
It's when you say a man, who knows who it will be? You know who will?
doesn't have to be a man,
Yeah,
but
but
what I want to
somebody
know
who-
is, what are the men going to do in this context
Yeah.
of this sort of hyper masculine
Yeah.
backlash to Me Too and,
Yeah.
and everything, which is,
It's strange talking about this, and I know we're going to do another talk about it. The young men of today, statistically, are the right wing, and they put Trump in office, among other reasons, and it's happening.
they're more right.
I mean, they're more right, and it's interesting right now. The polls have just closed here. They're closed
Yeah,
at 8,
we're
right?
talking on
we're talking on
election
election
day in
night in
Canada.
Canada. Yeah, April 28th, 2025.
Wow.
And just the other night, I was biking downtown Saturday night, and I just heard this guy shout to his friend, "You're voting conservative, right? Fuck, right, dude?" And it's like, "Fuck yeah!" And it was that voice is a true one. Like the right has captured the energy of men right now, and so that's it. In the 60s, what Dylan was doing, that was obviously you had people who were counter to it, but culturally, that absolutely dominated the 60s. This sense of, okay, we're done with this kind of materialism here of the 1950s and where we're going. We're done with Vietnam. We're done. We're yearning for something, whatever.
They
But
weren't done with Vietnam.
They
but,
weren't done with Vietnam, no.
They wanted to be.
They wanted to. Or
Protest.
they were, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I just think when you say who is a voice that way, you know what I'm caught with just thinking about that now is how, this is such an obvious thing to say, but how crucial music was to that
Yeah,
whole movement. And
absolutely.
And I can't even think in recent times, like you think about U2 in the 80s and 90s, writing about the troubles in Ireland, Sunday Bloody Sunday, New Year's Day, Bullet the Blue Sky, which is about Central America. There's a band that could write political songs that were great. But you think today, who is even, forget about being a leader and someone who's everyone is humming, but who is even writing protests? Who is writing songs that delve this deeply into culture and reveal it for what it is in an artful way. And I'm sure they're out there, but none are coming immediately to mind right now.
Yeah.
Are they to you? I think that's a really interesting question.
Not off the top of my head. Of course, we'll stop recording and we'll think of five.
Yeah, like five, yeah.
I think you're right, but not to say there's not a lot of great music out there, but think about before Dylan particularly.
Yeah.
It was like bubblegum pop was the big kind of thing, like Paul Anka and the He's So Fine or Leader of the Pack and all this kind of thing. It was interesting music and fun to listen to, but it was not.
Sure.
It had nothing to do with what was really happening in the world.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm interested in right now, because I think they're out there, but they haven't got famous.
But it's interesting too, right? And I'm not going to blame, because we always have record companies, and record companies have an enormous amount of power. We always have marketing that has an enormous amount of power. But we have today in Spotify and Apple Music, and we know the algorithms of Spotify absolutely support those who have already, have created a lot, and they'll put together playlists and the rest of it with their algorithms. And it's not that it's not out there, but it's just like in the way we now absorb media. We take the media in that reminds us, that reflects back who we are in a lot of ways, and we do the same with music. And I guess we could have, I'd love to keep talking about this idea of musicians, perhaps male musicians, that are writing about male experience and reflecting back the time in whatever way.
I think that might be a good place to wrap up, because there's a lot of threads that we could pull on from there, but they take us down a whole new direction, because you talked about this idea of right-wing manosphere grabbing the masculinity space.
The young men here.
And I know that you and I have had conversations, and I think we even talked briefly about it on record, about the left, whatever that might mean, not really having an alternative for that. And losing that space, because what does it mean to be a left-wing man?
The left pretty much rejected men outright in many ways, and that's a whole other thing to be looked at. But all right, we'll see you next time.
Okay,
we got a question for you.
Sure.
Could you think of anyone who you might consider a kind of socially conscious singer-songwriter now? We're talking about Dylan,
protest
singer, Dylan, Pete Seeger, anyone who, in whatever way, shape, or form, is like actually saying something about society. Like, does anyone come to mind for you?
No one who like is near the level of fame that those guys.
Yeah. Like in the past, you had like Rage Against the Machine. You had, I don't know. There are definitely people.
One of these is yours.
I can't think of. Yeah.
Is that the?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. I'm going to think about that. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head.
Yeah, I thought about Rage Against the Machine, but they're actually like 20 years, 30
I know,
years old.
Exactly.
Weird.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. We were sitting like, who is that person or group? And it's, wow. Like, we've got so much happening in the world.
Inequality or race. Maybe racism is, like, you could say.
Yeah, hip-hop is going to embrace that.
For sure.
Yeah. Totally. I wonder, in a short way, if the left became so obsessed in a generally a good way with kind of gender politics. So it's like it left the inequality piece and the economic inequality piece out of the equation. So what you have is remarkable female singers, bands coming and actually just saying my voice is important. That is the protest,
that's
right? Like
politics,
fuck you. I'm going to take up space, right? Yeah. But then what we're thinking is, where's the stuff about we have a system that also needs to be challenged, right? Yeah. So hey, maybe we answered it right now. That was very cool.
I think we've solved it all.
I think we've solved it all. Problem solved. Yeah, world is better.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Thank you for listening to What Kind of Man Are You? The podcast is hosted by Degan Davis and Chris Garbett, produced by Chris Garbett and VQC Media. We would love your feedback. Check out the show notes for ways to get in touch with us, leave a comment, or email us at chris@vqcmedia.me. Contact Chris about advertising and sponsorship opportunities. If you like what you hear, tell your friends, and please give us a thumbs up or a 5-star rating on your favorite platform.